Hello everybody, and welcome back to another video. In today's video, we'll be taking a look at the special elections that occurred on Tuesday. I know it's Thursday morning, so we're a little late to this, but I wanted to take a moment to kind of collect my thoughts and to talk a little bit about what I think about these races, because I haven't talked, I haven't made one video just talking about special elections since March, when Democrats flipped a state Senate district in Pennsylvania that voted for Trump by around 15 points. And obviously things have changed since March, but a lot of what I'm going to say is going to be similar. So in case you missed it, which is very possible because it's, these are just small special elections, we had a couple races. We had elections in Georgia, Alabama, California, and in Iowa. And in all four races, Democrats outperformed. Now, the degrees were different. In Georgia, it was about a 13% overperformance. It was a bit smaller in California and Alabama. In California, it was about 5%. Alabama was about 4%. And then, or actually, per Ethan C7, he has it as 5%. He's a prominent kind of election Twitter account who's pretty good. I follow him. He's he posts good stuff. So those were kind of the Alabama and California were a little smaller. Georgia was 13%, but Iowa was 22%. And Iowa specifically this year has been really interesting because we've had a bunch of special elections in Iowa, and in every single one, Democrats have outran by at least 15 to 20 points. In some, we got as much as 27 points. So overall, Iowa's been really friendly to Democrats since Trump was elected in 2024, and we've seen Democrats flip not just one but two state Senate seats. And what that means now that they flipped the second one as of Tuesday night, what that means is that the Iowa state legislature, the Republicans no longer have a supermajority, so Democrats can now more effectively contest cabinet appointments by incumbent Republican Governor Kim Reynolds. So overall, it's a small election, but Democrats do get to take away a little bit of a victory here just because they've now gained tangible power within the state of Iowa and because they now have broken the GOP supermajority. So what that means is, politically, pretty good news for Democrats, but obviously we're here to talk about the electoral side of it, which is that on paper, a 22% of performance is a really good sign. Now, I think that there's no real way to dispute that. It's pretty clear that this is a really interesting kind of race because the Senate district, which is based in Sioux City, it voted for Trump by 11% last year, and Democrats won it by over 10. So again, it was a 22-point swing. It's it's I'd say kind of a suburban seat because Sioux City is not a particularly big urban area. It's a city of 50 to 60,000 people. Not a super big city, but certainly more urban than a lot of these other deep red rural Iowa State Senate districts. So that's kind of the context. But a lot of people now are going to ask, okay, well, or I guess they're going to say, okay, well, Democrats have outperformed in a bunch of these special elections. Ethan does have a spreadsheet where he tracks, and overall, on average, Democrats have outrun by 13% relative to Kamala Harris's result last year. So in most cases, Democrats are doing quite well, and they're really putting on good performances kind of everywhere, really, with few exceptions, obviously. And so the question becomes, well, okay, if Democrats are outperforming by so much in all these special elections and they're doing so well, shouldn't that mean that we should be, focusing on Democrats doing well in 2026? Shouldn't that mean that we should begin to revise our expectations and, go, Democrats are probably in for a good year in 2026? Because in 2022 and 2018, special elections were pretty indicative. Democrats did pretty well in 2017 and 2018, and they had a really good 2018 midterm. And then in 2021, not really 2021, but more so in 2022 after the Dobbs decision, Democrats also did really well in special elections, across the country. They even flipped a House seat in Alaska in August of 2022. So overall, it was a really, really good, special elections had really good signs for Democrats before the past two midterm elections, and Democrats ultimately, they won big in 2018, and they did pretty well in 2022 compared to expectations. And so I get why people are interested in that. I get why a lot of people are eager to kind of go, okay, this is a good sign for Democrats. And it is. It's certainly a good sign. But I think we have to work with caution here because, and really mostly for two reasons. The first of which is that Democrats did really well in special elections leading up to 2024, and Kamala Harris lost to Donald Trump. Democrats did, in 2023, they were pretty good across the board. And then in early 2024, it was also pretty good. There was one exception in Colorado, but beyond that, it was pretty good. So overall, the broader trend, even more so than special elections being predictive of midterm elections, is that special elections have just been really favorable to Democrats for a couple of years now. And so you might be asking, well, why is that? Why do Democrats seem to do well in special elections? Why do they consistently put up these good results? Well, the answer is pretty simple, and it's differential turnout. Now, obviously, the question becomes, and I've made a helpful kind of infographic that we're going to playfully look at to end the video, but obviously, there's some level of persuasion. I believe in the Iowa special election here, which Democrats won by 20, where Democrats did 22% better. I believe there were at least a handful of voters who did indeed vote for Trump in 2024 and then vote for the Democrat in this election. That's just mathematically, it's very likely. But I think for the most part, what we're seeing is differential turnout. So again, this is my fun little, kind of joking kind of, I guess, chart for this kind of thing. Again, this isn't perfect. I've scaled this obviously kind of, not very specifically, and the turnout numbers aren't exact. Like, I'm not saying, I didn't calculate like what percent of presidential turnout we had for Republican registered voters in the midterms of 2022. It's just kind of, it's just kind of to give you an idea. But basically, what I've done is I've said I've put presidential turnout as our kind of scale factor. So we're saying 100% presidential turnout in a presidential year. Obviously, this is not 100% turnout because in any presidential election, not every single person who's registered to vote does indeed vote. But nonetheless, that's kind of what we're working with. We're just saying that like 100% of turnout is just, or of our like theoretical turnout is just presidential turnout, because that's obviously the highest. Presidential elections are obviously having the highest turnout of any election. And so at the bottom, when hypothetically, if only like 5 or 10% of people turned out, it would be the most engaged partisan voters, right? So maybe for Democrats, to give an example, that's probably like college professors, people who are very engaged in politics, who tend to be very liberal, stuff like that. And then, for Republicans, that might be people who are like involved in conservative organizations, who, maybe even work in politics. That applies to both sides. And then at the top, where you only get these people who turn out in presidential years for your party, you have the occasional voters. Maybe vote only, maybe every 4 years. They skip out on maybe their midterm elections and their special elections and their legislative elections, but they vote for president. And we saw that in 2024 kind of benefited Trump, because we had a lot of voters who were pretty friendly to him who didn't vote in 2022. And so that was good for Trump. That was good for Republicans last year. But it wasn't very good for them in the midterms in 2022, because, as you can see, there were a lot of Trump voters, or Republican voters, as we're identifying them here, who did not show up in the midterm elections. And obviously the same was true for Democrats. There were certainly some Kamala Harris voters who did not show up in the midterm elections. But as you can see, the gap, the drop-off in turnout for the GOP was a bit bigger. And that's kind of the consensus. That's the conventional wisdom, which is that in most states, there's some exceptions, but especially in the Midwest, states like Iowa, the 2022 electorate was better for Democrats than the 2024 electorate, probably by a fair amount. I believe that if you ran the 2024 election between Harris and Trump under a 2022 electorate, Kamala Harris probably would have won Wisconsin, Michigan, and potentially Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania's a little trickier, but probably. Remember, Kamala Harris lost Wisconsin by 0.6%. Tony Evers won by 3.5%. So I think she probably would have narrowly won it. And I think Evers probably got, an electorate that would have voted for Harris by like a point or so. Maybe half a point, right? So that's what happens in midterm elections, is that generally we see turnout drop from both sides, obviously, but it's a bit more on the Republican side. Then special elections is way bigger, because special elections often have very low turnout. I did the math. It was roughly 36% of total presidential turnout in the special election in Iowa's 1st district on Tuesday night. So that means like roughly a little more than 1 out of every 3 presidential voters cast a ballot in this special election, which, by the way, is actually pretty good for a special election. Usually it's kind of in the 20s. So 36% turnout is certainly worth noting. It's more than normal. But nonetheless, special elections, we see turnout for everyone drop. But as you can see, Republicans suffer a little more than Democrats. Democratic turnout, as a share of their presidential turnout, kind of their highest point, it's a bit higher than Republican turnout. So now the question is, well, why is this? And the first thing I want to say is that it was not always this way, and especially during the Bush era and the Obama era, and even maybe the first year of Trump. It was kind of the conventional wisdom before it began to change. But the consensus, this was backed up by a lot of kind of historical precedent. The consensus was that Democrats or that Republicans benefited from low turnout environments because Republicans were winning white college-educated voters, and those are the voters. And it's really just it's now become college-educated voters, but especially white college-educated voters who used to be deeply conservative in this country, but have since gotten a bit more liberal. The thing that benefited Republicans was that when you had turnout drop, it dropped off more with voters of color and working class voters. Both those demographics were pretty favorable to Barack Obama. Now, who did Mitt Romney do well with? College-educated voters, especially college-educated white voters. He did really well with those voters. And so when you had a special election, people turned out less, but again, the turnout dropped off more with the Obama blocks than the Romney blocks. And that's why you had Republicans doing really well in special elections, and that's why the kind of the political conventional wisdom became Democrats do well in high turnout environments, which is why, in high turnout elections like 2008 and 2012, Obama won. But when you scale it back, like the 2014 midterms where turnout was pretty low, or you give a special election, right, the Republicans are going to do well. And obviously that was true to an extent. I wouldn't say it was disproven. I think that, I think the dynamics just changed. But now it's kind of the opposite. The Republicans do a lot better with working class voters in the Trump era than the Obama era. And they've made notable gains with voters of color, especially Hispanic voters. But on the flip side, they've done worse with white college-educated voters and really all college-educated voters, though the shift has been especially pronounced among those white college-educated voters. So now you get results that are kind of the opposite, where Democrats, who are doing better with these voters that are more likely to turn out, can outperform in special elections. So really, like, by running the Iowa election, maybe presidentially, it's Trump plus 11, but the electorate that showed up was probably something closer to, Harris plus 5 or 8, maybe, right? Somewhere in that range. I haven't done the exact math, but it's probably that the electorate that showed up to that special election was a lot more Democratic friendly than the electorate that showed up to the presidential election. So that is what is happening here. So when you see that Democrats outperform by 22%, yes, it's a good sign for them. It's a good thing that they're doing that for their electoral prospects. But we have to remember a big chunk of that, in fact, the clear majority of that swing did not come from Trump voters switching to voting for Democrats. It came from turnout. Democrats dropped off in turnout, Republicans dropped off in turnout too, but Democrats dropped off less. Therefore, the electorate became a lot more favorable to them, and that's why they won the election. Now, to be fair, there were probably some people, like I said, who did indeed vote for Trump, who maybe switched to the Democrat. But overall, this was a race, and the other special elections too, where Democrats have done well, it's turnout. That's what matters. So if at any point later this year we have another special election, I don't cover it, feel free to come back to this video and remember the guide to special elections. This is, in a nutshell, what's kind of happening. It's not exact. It's not perfect. Please don't, try to find where my turnout estimates kind of meet my little legend here. But this is what's happening is we get presidential years, we have our kind of turnout baseline. In midterm elections, both parties decrease, but Democrats do a little bit better. In special elections, both parties decrease a lot, but Democrats still hold a bit of an advantage. And so overall, that's kind of what you're looking at, and that is what is essentially happening here. So please let me know what you think. If you believe these special elections should maybe be considered a little more. For now, I'm still skeptical, but we're going to keep watching. So thanks for watching. I'll see you all next time.